Again, thank you everybody for joining us for this media briefing on the Green Grids initiative and our work globally. My name is Lucy Pearson. I'm the Executive Director of the Climate Parliament and a member of the Green Grids Initiative Secretariat. Firstly, thanks very much to Megan Taylor and the team at Infinite Global, Tal and Charlotte for helping us put this together. Today, you will hear a few short presentations from our team, and then we will leave time for question and answer. Please use the Q&A box on the link to add any questions you have for the team, and we'll get to as many as we can in the time. If we miss any, we will follow up afterwards via email. Now, without further ado, I will hand you over to Marcus Stewart. Marcus has over 30 years experience with National Grid. He is currently seconded to the UK's Department of Energy Security and Net Zero and leads our work on the Green Grids Initiative, a global work programme. Marcus, please tell us why there is no transition without transmission.
Thank you, Lucy, and hello to everybody. So you want to move on to the next slide, Lucy? Next one. Right, so I guess the question is today is why grids and why now? I think it's pretty well understood that we need to largely electrify our economies if we're going to meet climate change ambitions and deliver an energy transition that is clean, affordable and sustainable. And the backbone to that is the grid, but it is often overlooked. It's estimated that globally 300 billion is spent on grids today, but that figure needs to double to around 600 billion per annum if we're to keep our climate change targets on track. That's a finding from the recent IEA report. But when you look at emerging and developing economies, the amount of grid infrastructure required is even more significant, moving from 70 billion to around about 300 billion per annum by 2030. These are huge, huge numbers and requires a huge scaling up of the grid infrastructure. And if we don't do it, we're going to really struggle to meet our climate ambitions. The IEA report that was published earlier this month identified that if there is a delay in grid infrastructure, it puts 1.5 degrees out of reach, and it's a 40% chance of exceeding 2 degrees C. And we're seeing challenges in grid infrastructure. I mean, there's a few headlines there on the left-hand side of the screen. There are connection queues in Europe and the US. There's blackouts and rolling brownouts in Southern Africa. The grid is struggling at the moment with the transition, and it's, as I said, it's being overlooked. So within the Green Grids Initiative, the program that we're running, we're really trying to bring that focus onto grids and look at the challenges and unblock those challenges, and take big steps forward to help accelerate the delivery of grid infrastructure, both within country but also interconnectors and regional interconnection. So we can move on to the next slide, please, Lucy. So in October 2021, we were formally launched at the COP26 climate conference, and we were there in partnership with the Indian government and their One Sun, One World, One Grid ambition. And 92 countries signed up to the One Sun Declaration, which covers a number of activities and a number of commitments to further the delivery of renewable energy and the grids that connect them. And since then, we've been focusing really on a number of key areas. One of those is around finance for grids, which is seen as a key blocker. Another is around technical support and best practice sharing in terms of learning, taking learning from one part of the world and sharing it to other parts of the world. And currently, our program has got activities happening in Africa and in also the Asia Pacific region. And we've built an ecosystem of partners and collaborators which are bringing that knowledge and that experience together so we can share that and take that to the regions and to the countries and the the networks that are struggling to deploy their grids and provide that help. So I'm going to talk briefly about some of the key activities that we're doing. If you can go to the next slide, please, Lucy. So one of the things that we're doing is looking at how to accelerate interconnection projects. We're working in the Asia Pacific region with our Asia Pacific work group on this. There is huge potential for interconnection in that region, but there are currently low levels of interconnection. So what we've been doing is working with our partners and looking at experience elsewhere, particularly in the North Sea, where there are currently the two longest subsea interconnectors and several interconnectors connecting the UK and Europe. And also within Europe, there is large levels of interconnection. So we're taking that learning and identifying the processes and the protocols that are needed to deliver that, how government to government relationships need to work, how regulator to regulator relationships need to work. And we're codifying that into a set of principles, which are in draft at the moment. We should be launching those at COP28. And we'll be sharing that more widely and working specifically in the Asia Pacific region, but these apply to any region, to apply these directly to projects later next year. If we can move on to the next slide, please. Another key area and challenge area for grids, particularly in developing countries, is the financing of the grids. And we've been working with our partners at Climate Compatible Growth and the universities of UCL and Imperial College on a number of papers and looking at the way concessionary finance can be brought into grids. So currently around 40% of grid projects would be eligible for concessionary finance, which means 60% of projects would not be eligible. And concessionary finance is quite critical to de-risk some of these projects. And so we've been working with the finance industry institutes, multilateral development banks, World Bank, Green Climate Fund, and looking at ways that we can put forward a different and new forward-looking methodologies which will unlock those projects and enable more projects to be eligible for concessionary finance, which will then help de-risk those projects. And the aim is then that will help to attract private finance, which is essentially needed to deliver those projects. So we produced a number of papers. We're in continued discussion with the development banks and the World Bank, for example, and we're hoping that early next year we'll get to a place where there's agreement and new methodologies are being put into place. And we'll be hoping to try, and the other thing we're doing in this is we are actually testing this with a live project in Africa, working with the Southern African Power Pool on a project between Zimbabwe, Zambia, Botswana, and Namibia, the Zizabona project, and that is going through the project preparation stage currently with the African Development Bank. So it's a real life project, real life proof of concept, which once we've identified all the intricacies of that, we'll be able to roll that out across the region, but also share that between regions as well. If you can move on to the next slide, please, Lucy. One of the other things that we're doing is focusing on how we can support governments in developing not only their grids, but also their energy infrastructure specifically. So we've developed a practical guide for ministers and officials to help them navigate their energy transition. It's called the Electricity Transition Playbook, and it looks at it from the aspect of 9 key building blocks. So starting with the vision of where do you want to get to, what the energy mix needs to look like, what legislation and policy needs to be put in place to support that, what delivery mechanisms are required, so what market mechanisms, how do you support the delivery of renewables, what network infrastructure is needed and how to plan and look at that from consenting and delivery, operability. You need a grid in place, but it needs to be operable. So how do you operate that with high levels of renewable generation? What's the challenges around storage and things like that? What enabling technology is needed to assist this transition? So the grid of the future needs to be highly digitalized. Data is really important, but the demand side plays a really important role. and that takes us through to public participation and support. We need to mobilise a huge revolution in the energy system, so it needs buy-in from the consumers, from business at the start in terms of understanding where we're going, but also in terms of how they're going to interact with that energy system. And also there'll be an impact on local communities with new assets that they're going to see, overhead lines or solar parks, wind farms. So we need to build that understanding, and engagement is a key part of delivering this transition. And you can't deliver this transition without having the people to build it. So we need to focus on the supply chain. The supply chain needs to seriously ramp up to deliver the ambitions around grids globally, and also the skills and the workforce need to deploy. So we need to consider how to take that forward and look at it from a just energy transition perspective as well. So nobody is left behind, and what skill. For governments need to think about the skills, how they bring those through, and how they deliver that workforce of the future. And then finally, you need to be able to finance it. And again, looking at some of the experience that we're building with our finance work, how does that apply? What are the models that work across different jurisdictions? Who's good at this? And the playbook brings this all together. It takes global best practice. We've got expertise that's from all over the world that we're bringing together to really help guide and support governments. And we've been running it as online and in-person training. And again, we'll be launching this at COP28. So Lucy, can you move on to the next slide, please? And finally, another piece of work that we're doing is we're working with partners, Transition Zero, Climate Compatible Growth, Dartmouth College, SFU, to put together an open source evidence base for interconnected corridors. This is a platform and a model which will allow specific corridors to be assessed and modelled. It fills a gap in the market, so to speak. There's little information there about the potential of certain pathways and corridors. So this aims to fill that gap. It's to help governments to understand the opportunity. It's to help financiers and developers to understand the opportunity too, and also act as a benchmark and a test case. And again, with our partners, we'll be sharing more about this at COP28. And talking of COP28, I'm now going to hand over to my colleague, Rob Cook, who's going to talk about some of the key events that we're planning for COP. Over to you, Rob.
Thank you, Marcus. And thank you, everyone, for joining the briefing. My name is Rob Cook. So I work with Marcus as part of the Green Grids Initiative Secretariat. So grids will gain a new spotlight at COP28 like never before. The COP28 presidency is calling for countries to support the Global Renewables and Energy Efficiency Pledge. And this pledge will recognize that underneath the headline targets, countries need to take drastic action, both domestically and internationally, to accelerate the development of grids, and identify, as part of that, enabling actions, including accelerated permitting of clean energy infrastructure, improving energy system integration, developing cross-border interconnections, and scaling up investment, among others. So, as presented by Marcus, since our launch at COP26, we've been working to accelerate these actions globally, and more recently working closely with the COP28 presidency to build these actions as a core part of their agenda and champion them across the summit. Both the Secretariat and key members of our ecosystem will be participating across several events, which we've listed a few here and can share again following the briefing. I think want to draw particular attention to presidency roundtables, which will be hosted on the 5th of December, also known as Energy Day. This includes a public-private roundtable on greening the grid, which is supported by the GGI and the Global Renewables Alliance, and will focus on these enablers, highlighting leading actions and building consensus around next steps. There will also be a roundtable focusing on the pledge, which you may be interested in, which we've listed just below. And also to draw your attention to the launch of the Electricity Transitions Playbook, which will be happening on the 6th of December, as Marcus just explained. And there are a number of other events that are being hosted by the ecosystem partners, Climate Compatible Growth and Transition Zero, which you may notice on the slide above, is hosting an event on the 3rd of December, and Climate Parliament is hosting a Green Grids Investment Dialogue on the 4th. I can't list them all. There's a lot happening, and I do suggest kind of keeping an eye out across the COP presidency agenda There should be more information online if you check the COP Presidency website. And also paying attention to key pavilions like the Africa Pavilion, the International Solar Alliance Pavilion, which will also be hosting related events. Thank you. I'll pass over to Lucy to talk a bit more about the ecosystem.
Much more, Marcus, and I will keep this brief, but just to very briefly give you an idea of who we work with. The Green Grids Initiative ecosystem is made up of partners in government, energy agencies, academia, multilateral development banks, as well as not NGOs like the Climate Parliament and complementary initiatives like the Powering Past Coal Alliance and so on. We have almost or over 200 experts across our working groups, primarily in South Asia and Africa and Europe, but we are obviously expanding. So just to give you briefly an overview of some of our leadership team, you've heard from Rob and Marcus and myself. Again, the Climate Parliament is a global network of members of Parliament working to combat climate change. We work primarily in Africa, South Asia and Latin America. We have Will Blythe on the team. He's a senior research fellow at the UK Foreign Office, Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. He's our research and technical lead and coordinates the work across the climate compatible growth team, and very, very crucial in building our working groups across the initiative. We have Professor Steve Pye, I believe, is on the line as well. He leads as a professor of energy systems at the University College London, leads the research on the climate mobilizing climate finance for grids investments and the global interconnector study with a colleague Abhishek Shukakumar in Transition Zero. I believe his Simone is also on the line who works as part of that team. We have Georgie Skipper, who's currently an international faculty fellow and visiting scholar at MIT, brings a wealth of experience from her time at Sun Cable to the team, and is a founding member of the Green Grids Initiative. We have Moketsi Tabela. He is the Chief Renewable Energy Investment Specialist at the African Development Bank and leads our work for the Africa Working Group, particularly focused on the Zizabona project that Marcus mentioned earlier. We have Matt Wittenstein. He is the Chief of Section for Energy Connectivity in UNESCAP, the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, and leads our work for the Asia Pacific Working Group, primarily on the Principles for Interconnectors project that Marcus mentioned earlier, and a knowledge exchange for small island developing states energy regulators. We also have Andy Flagg. I'm not sure if Andy's on the line, but Andy is the coordinator of the Regulatory Energy Transition Accelerator, also known as RETA, which was launched as part of COP26 as well. And he leads our engagement with regulators on a global decarbonisation program. And RETA has today launched a new report. RETA is formed of IRENA, the World Bank, SMEP and the International Energy Agency, and this report is on regional power system integration. I will stop there, but just for everyone's information, I will send around an information pack with everything we've mentioned today. We have a website, www.greengridsinitiative.net, with a resource library of all the key reports on grids, both from agencies like the IEA, but also from our ecosystem. And that will be updated across the next few months as well, with everything that goes on at COP28. We also have a wide grids blog series that's with pieces written by our ecosystem members, which really makes the case for grids and their critical importance to the energy transition. It's time for questions, I believe. I will hand over to Tal. Please go ahead if we've got any questions from the team.
Thanks, Lucy, and thanks everyone for the presentations. It's really interesting to hear about the progress that's being made on grids and some of the challenges that you guys are seeing as well in delivery. And just to reiterate, there is a Q&A function in the webinar, so if anyone does have any questions, feel free to pop them in, and we'll try and address them, or in follow-up after the webinar. You guys will have seen there was a pre-question to this webinar which related to energy projects across Africa. Marcus, maybe you want to field this one. where can people go to find the most up-to-date information about what projects are actually in progress and getting close to delivery? It can often feel like there's a lot of plans being laid, but where can people find the most up-to-date information about stuff that's actually being delivered and where shovels are hitting the ground?
Cool, right, thank you. I don't think we've got Maketsi online from our Africa group, because this would be an ideal one for him. But there's, we're focusing on particularly interconnection projects in Africa, and as I said, we're looking at the Zizabona project particularly, and applying the climate finance modelling work that Climate Compatible Growth have been doing to that project to try and unlock that. That project is part of the African Union's Continental Master Plan and the PEDA PAP2 process, and it was shortlisted from that. So I think, in terms of knowing where projects are, that is a place to look in particular, and I think that would be the place. And I know that process, I think, all those projects are being refreshed. Is like a review process that happens with those projects. So I think that's happening over the next year. Alongside that, I mean, we're working on the Zizabona project with the Southern African Power Pool. So again, they sort of take on the front end element of that work. So looking at what they're publishing and their status reports will be a good place to look as well. So I think that those are the kind of things. And other projects, I'm just thinking, the World Bank are also supporting and looking at specific projects within the region as well. So they will have a list of projects that they're identifying again. So again, looking at getting information from the World Bank would be another place to look. But we could probably provide a list as part of the pack as well of projects of what their statuses are. So we can, we'll reach back out to our colleagues in Africa and probably add that to the pack as well, if that's helpful.
We have Steve and Abby on the line as well, who are working on the project in Southern Africa. I wonder, Steve or Abby, if you would like to comment here.
Sure. No, I can say a few words. I mean, I think the key focus for us is providing kind of modelling support for the interconnection projects in the region, and we are focusing on this Zizabona project, but also looking at other opportunities for increased connectivity across the region, with a specific focus on the economic benefits, but also the climate benefits of these different projects, which is really important for funders who are looking to invest in climate friendly projects. So there's a lot of work ongoing. It's still in progress, but we're hoping over the coming months that we'll see some progress in terms of how that project is moving forward.
Thanks, Steve. I think we've had a few questions come in the chat. I think I can wrap these up into kind of one bigger question, which is, how does the Green Grids Initiative collaborate internationally with governments around the world, particularly in relation to wider and multilateral projects that are underway, such as the ASEAN Power Grid? What is the initiative's involvement in those bigger projects, and how do you collaborate with governments around the world to deliver?
Sure. I'll take that one then. So we have our working group in the Asia Pacific region that's chaired by Matt from the UN, and as part of that working group we have representation from ASEAN Centre for Energy, for example, and so the work that we're doing on the principles will be feeding into the work that's happening on the ASEAN Power Grid. We see that as an enabling piece of work that's to help that overall project. We're also collaborating with some of the other organisations that are involved in that. So I can't remember the acronym now, the SEATP, Southeast Asia Energy Partnership, I think, or Rob will probably correct me, but I'll get the correct title. But we're in discussion with them about how we can bring in our ecosystem partners to support specific aspects of those projects. So yes, the ASEAN Power Grid is a project that we're really keen to support, and finding out the right way that we can do that is something that we're having discussions on now. But the principles work is a foundational piece that feeds into that, and and the same for other projects and other governments. The playbook is a tool that we're using to engage with governments and help them develop their own transition pathways and understand what gaps that they have, and then where they can get help and support and technical assistance. So that's one other aspect. And then I think there was a question around GuideCo, I think, in the chat as well. So whilst we're not directly connected to the GuideCo activity, we are engaging with them, and where we've got common challenges or common questions, then we're working collaboratively. But we've had, I have to say, a little bit of contact with GuideCo, but not a huge amount to date. But there's no reason why we can't. We're open, and anybody can come and help and work with us ecosystem. So I don't think that's there's any particular challenges there or anything different. It's just the way the conversation has gone to date is such. And finally, there was a question around the Indian government's One Sun, One World, One Grid project. So again, we were launched in COP26 alongside that work. We have a regular dialogue with both the ISA and the Indian government, and we understand that project is progressing, and they're hoping to present and launch some material in the coming months, really. So we're very keen to see the outcomes of that as well. I think the analysis there will be complementary to the analysis that the Transition Zero team are doing and the open source platform that they're developing. So again, we can see these pieces of initiatives and work coming together to unpick the opportunities and identify where potentially strong projects are, and then bring together governments and actors to send and mobilize resources to deliver them, really, which is what we're trying to support.
Thanks, Marcus. I'm conscious of time, but just one final question to end on, and along those lines of bringing governments together. COP28 in a couple of weeks. What's the most important thing that you think legislators and policymakers should be discussing with regard to grids, given the IEA report the other day, 80 million kilometers of grids needed over the next few years? Seems a lot. How deliverable is that, and what would you like to see happen at COP28 to help hasten that delivery?
Great. So, I mean, we're supporting a ministerial roundtable at COP28, as Rob highlighted, and the two themes that we think are the most important to discuss around grids there are around finance and how you support grids to bring in the finance, so how you de-risk it, how you bring in the right regulatory regimes, how we bring private finance in to deliver this, because as you say, it's a terrific challenge, and we don't have a lot of time, so we need to mobilize that finance quickly, and we want governments and financiers and industry to work together. And the second element on that is really you need to be able to build, and that's where the sort of supply chain and the resources come in as well. And again, we're hoping that we're aiming for that dialogue to look at how we work, how governments and industry and supply chain can work together to provide that certainty, so they can invest, so they can ramp up to deliver these projects. Because again, for the last 40 years, the grid system has been quite steady, and the supply chain is designed to match. We've got this big ramp up. How do you ramp up the supply chain? Where do you get the skills from to do that? So again, so I think those are two key areas that we are aiming to make real progress on at COP28, and they will be then foundational and enabling to deliver the grids that are essential for our future.
Thanks, Marcus. And you mentioned the toolkit earlier as well. I think for any journalists on the call, the toolkit is a good resource for you guys as well, to help arm you with questions to go to COP with, and to follow up with anyone in governments that you might be discussing these issues with, not least in terms of following the money, as Marcus put it, that is the critical issue that needs to be addressed. Thank you, guys. I'm conscious we're a couple of minutes over. Lucy, anything to wrap up with?
Yes, no, as I said earlier, I will send a follow-up email with everything we've discussed today, links to the reports and so on, including members of our ecosystem who are here, Abby, Steve, and others. Abhishek's team at Transition Zero is launching the Global Interconnectors study at COP with a wealth of data on decarbonisation potential for interconnectors and so on. So worth following up. But I'm happy to channel any questions and connect anybody to members of the ecosystem if of interest. But that's it from us. Thank you very much again, everybody, for joining.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.